so that the cleaner of the something on the specific or like the right side like info has favored and helped out, stealthily helped out Sandra so much throughout like Sandra's journey, like the was to be all due to that I'm still remember to that initially it might have been due to that wanted to get that revenge on Sandra for like basically eliminating that the Nagini guy. It's definitely not a preemption. So because like I don't know for example for the like the guy might have been like the actual younger product of like might be the case especially in that present info and like the guy naturally might be like the sons of like in might be the case is definitely not a preemption. So yeah, definitely my definitely impressions for like after like Hundred has eliminated like the guy like definitely like it hopes that might have had that finally had might have that might have been something that Info might have seen up to the sun or Harry's from all minutes. So like at that point itself, like Info might have fixed in its mind to like definitely was that absolute revenge of like that absolute suffering to like Sangon and eventually that way like by getting Sangon into wrapping Sangon into like the drinking for experience and using which and having Sangon go through all that experience suffering by Info himself like stealthily helping Sangon take it to like to him in like 2024 where like might have planned to like face off against like Sangyang and basically like at that point for like info to as like an area effect from that way to do that absolute show to touch the realities and then therefore like info to that eliminate like Sangyang like the final round might have been Inho's plan. So like at that point like the moment Inho had certainly found out about like the elimination for the targeting guy maybe at that point might have been when like info might have straight away when targeted Janke Sangyang's level from Jande and might have dropped and lower than Dortmund as well into the midst of my body. It is definitely my conversation. So definitely I'm looking that what might have changed all of that with after that absolute revenge of that suffering and suffering to Alexander all that changing initially might have been through that the boatman parts that elimination recent elimination is definitely one of them because that at that point I'm looking like info might out only felt that he had absolutely known because that the only people that Info might have felt that he had after like losing in them like the only people that Info might have felt even while running like the episodes to get that the only people that Info might have felt as that he would have uh, that Info might have seen as practical that might have been solely like younger brother the Nagini guy as well as that the workman part like only for might have been like the case of Newman bro so like one like Info had heard the news about that the Boatman Park has been getting eliminated like with all of the Zati guy as well as them as well getting eliminated. Like at that point I'm like informative of pets absolutely need to only it is like as like or alone as like he has a hair absolutely no one. So like at that point informative felt afraid to uh have someone in the lab and that someone like available like at that point might have seen in like side or that been what might have happened. The desperation of info desperation out the arising out of like that feeling of absolutely no one enough within like info might have resulted in that info deciding to die. And until that point like info then like attempting and like actually succeeding in that point like Sandon I would might have been only part of like that revenge of like might have which of in that info want on Sandon might have been the case. But like from that point on I'm the of info the second so right now even giving like in an extremely unfair manner giving that add extra advantage to like Sangyon and giving Sangyon that weapon and basically for Sangyon to like eliminate like the other studying candidates and to for Sangyon to along with like the maybe to become like the winner of like the Prince of City. Like so right now in like the second day all the ranking that extreme advantage with Sangyon maybe definitely improve that final attempt to that but after that Sangyon already having the choices on ideology by making the echo that also like involve that current attempt by by giving the servant to that Sangyon will be definitely most like final strike at like the absolute destruction of like Sangyon like ideology to that they involve with only hoping that but that Sangyon film once like Sangyon be eliminating all the other student candidates and becoming like the winner of the Indian possible by the like Sangyon ideology would have suddenly been destroyed to the point of like Sangyon with the mindset of returning into it being exactly like info. So that like at that point that info would be like Sangyon would be info would be able to like manipulate and turn Sangyon into becoming a partner of like the it gets like the year 2025 so that from that point on like not made so would be able to like connect to get from 2025 but like info to also getting a friend roles, as well as like there might be this like secret role, which like even from like the very inception, from like the beginning of students from 9 to 99 cells, like that's the original creator of Facebook, which I'm still remember the name, which might definitely not be Ilna, but like Ilna might have been like the winner of like the studios in that 1999, while like the creation of like the studios might have been a totally different person. And like it might have been that the role that golden role that like golden creator of the studios might have made and like might have followed throughout like the entirety of like 6 years from 1999 to like the present. Um, this might have been like lead like the big the person who was like serving to run like he gets to be like the next path to like run like Indians to definitely to bring up an next student candidate with them. Might be that golden role, might be the case, definitely. So like in them might have been definitely might not have been one of the studios in like might have played at one of the studios in like 99 and might have been the case definitely my friend. So definitely info basically then like becoming like next higher to run experience upper in might have been probably to like the more than fundamental everything like info the that the most likely the son of like we have that even though that the thing might have played a role as a factor, and that will be more than that, it might have been like a factor that info was able to win that 2015 Squid Games might have been certainly that in now totally deciding uh, selecting info as like the chosen one to totally hand over like the range of like around the symptoms and everything. Definitely not the brand. So like right now with like info as well gaining of age like and like I'm thinking like info as well would be thinking of like basically tools with like especially with like info and looking like that I could be like as well as like the with like front platform might have actually been an extra thing enough. So yet like I'm thinking with like the I think I think not young enough than that info still I'm considering like the I think I might have never want like the stupid might definitely not all be an extra thing enough might be the memorization might be the reason for like the I think I during that while the past scenario where like the Raggedy guy has played like that during like the Raggedy guy's elimination that is with the fact that like the Raggedy guy was so extremely insecure and extremely jealous, appeared extremely insecure and extremely jealous of like the whole pattern that like Sangyo is like an exclusive game dinner. It's definitely meant for invention. So definitely yet that can be like informative had that absolute firm faith in that so that the guy eventually being able to like eventually playing one of that games in like the Twitter and becoming the winner of like plus two games right? Like the future and it, at that point for like info to pass on like the range of that surrounding games to like the right guy might have been in host plan but then put like the right guy control elimination like the right guy like that put in was like and with like the recent elimination of Park as well definitely info on top of that feeling extremely lonely that info might have gone for the road and extremely insecure about that the uncertainty as for like info having absolutely no one to like pass on like the uh, reins of that reins of that basically running that student aspect to become like the next high up to like run like student maybe along the lines and all my that stuff because like definitely even though there were like all the lessons like students have been going on from like 1999 and there were still like so there are all to the great past game winners like still like it might have been only like workman part as well as it might have been unlike in both might have been only like the boatman path alone that might have been land to the and after like in that it might have been only like so as well as like the boatman path alone that might have been like and maybe even capable that might have been like ex to give trainers who still wanted to like letting it being part of like the students and work for the students and they just definitely not the in whole actually understand might have been extremely passionate about like so extremely passionate about like the hero of like specific games and basically for like the to for each year to be able to like conduct like even better bands like the previous year and just like it might have been of like the biggest priority in person like definitely my favorite ambition. So that way, like finding an next hire for like the job and like the student as well might be a hope like the just in top priority like I hope might be also the gaming friendly conversation might be also the reason for that info even in like the beginning time when revealed that even while even back when like till I'm alive and not like about conducting in the studio like back in like info for only that the fun manner of by building up that in the concept of like connecting and running like what's the doing like the fact that like Demho back then has found out that info was like had been living not a luxurious life in like the very beginning that as well definitely would be due to that info not connecting like experience in actually for like the money but like so the reason for like info even being out of money to make more and more money would be solely to like invest all that money into solely like experiences that so that like would like each next year like info would be able to like kind of like which things make the game get more better and but like the is so like the it was like the game like the bigger and bigger and continuing on would be like the biggest priority in his life the film and the project. This as well might be like another cool factor in that you know right now in that kind of man of doing this weapon to like stand your uh so that like some around like maybe will be ending up with a literally never taking in the portfolio because like so that so as a man of like you know would be okay, getting upfront through Sangyong by thoroughly changing Sangyong ideology to that, making it exactly like involved that involved in not only getting upfront, but like to that way make Sangyong that the partner involved from that the student of that 2025, while also simultaneously that they for like and Sangyong to like to take care of like the baby, so that like importantly would be being like that way, just like the baby and on like Sangyong also becoming like the winner of like the real the confidence then that way like that golden role would be followed and that way that once like the baby would be eventually growing up like at that point that since by then like involved really extremely old that even if info doesn't make it to that and it's not ends up not being being able to like see like the day once like the baby grows up like still like generally a bit that would be able to that ensure that like the cooking continues on through by even if like info gets eliminated before that like due to those that voltage or still like to for like engage like only it's like about the like this pro at this pro sound like basically that the students will continue by foreign to like for that to like assign the task to like the pass the sound to like only like pass on like to one like the student to like build up this like daily the proper of like the so or like for like the students will have eventually like continue on I mean process to be like the next to that on student once that into the uh once like should be growing up yeah to really to make this happen and in that way to like for like info to be able to like ensure that like the student will continue on even after like info like in nation this will be currently like the top biggest priority for info right now might be the reason for making for right now. Then unfair manner like these false multiple tables might be the reason for making for right now in an unfair manner within the next weapon direction and hectic kind of might be the reason especially one film. Also the play my considering ambition right now with like Sanjay right now accepting like the weapon like I'm like the left right once like the lights will be turning off like I'm putting like Sanjay initially that the like under not from making the move like the moment like the light will be turning off that kind of thing like even after like the lights will be turning off that kind of thing like Sanjay will be lying there with his like eyes wide awake and basically carefully observing with that with this like even in like the after seconds when that definitely Sanjay only using his ears to like basically that and with the that essentially like Sanjay will be hearing like the voices of like snoring from that the single community and that eventually that Sundown different ways can Sundown be sharing like the of multiple student and like snoring. And basically eventually once like Sundown would be giving it enough time in that darkness in that kind of left night where like Sundown would be feeling confident enough that like it would like them all having all that food like it will by then that for them would be extremely tired and when you can't sleep like once Sundown would be only feeling confident about it like at that point like Sundown slowly get and like slowly trying to like make move and I'm also trying like trying to that as just like eliminating two thinking candidates like the scenario that I was two or three thinking candidates I'm also trying that trying to eliminating and I'm also trying like those thinking and among like those two or three thinking candidates I'm also trying one of the definitely be that involvement thinking candidates like the scenario that I'm definitely covering right next to like that. And I'm still considering definitely I'm those two or three thing and get that like kind of will be eliminating at that point. Definitely none of that will be neither means of like when you can die some of the scenarios that I'm looking for. And I'm considering that and I'm totally predicting that the empty guy alone will be away from that point and will be like even the black line don't like with that would self that eliminating that subject and it on by only still like empty guy would be wide awake was like definitely which they are paying that reward money of like that last ticket that right there electricity generator on the floor like that 20 coin guy it only seeing like expecting such a scenario or like in that one like the light should be turning off like if you just generate attempting to like eliminate and all that. So that when the guy even though he will be feeling tired and would be wanting to like fall asleep but still would be like holding on and they would be still wide awake let the darkness let the light might be the case while when so with only asleep and with only another standard like standard elimination everything is certainly going to bring this so definitely going to bring standard eliminating at least two or three speaking candidates and after eliminating that whole my speaking candidate and taking like the next speaking candidate that would be lying asleep next after like those next speaking candidate who like something will be next trying to like eliminate would be luckily able to with that villanistic and exceptionally strong and confident in that speaking candidate definitely who like really who had like recently communicated like basically the black government speaking candidate is like the scenario that so like that speaking candidate will be definitely currently among like the remaining surviving speaking candidate like that speaking candidate is currently most likely was strong especially my friend. So after like eliminating it or like speaking candidate as left son will be about to eliminate that strong speaking candidate. At that point I was found that son was like that being stopped by like that strong speaking candidate was like exactly like when one guy like that strong speaking candidate as well. You know, he would be feeling all tired and sleepy after like consenting on that film, like still I'm like he would be remaining wide awake because like thing as well might be anticipating such an attack in like from the night stuff so like that way like someone attempt to like eliminate like that something get like only back for it and like that way that's the like an absolute fight happening in that darkness between like that between candidate as well as like someone like the scenario that I'm trying and like until then like the elimination that like someone will be carrying out the piece of that absolute stealth while ensuring that some people so until that point I'm doing it will be only the MT1 guy as well as that's going to be candidate alone who will be wide awake and basically will be aware of Sanjon movements and Sanjon doing all this that you know while men so bit obviously but like one Sanjon will be so that one the whole fight between that strong speaking candidate and Sanjon will be happening at that point I'm looking which as well ending up being a way to narrative parameters this whole clash between Sanjon and that song giving and ending up with the baby as well, waking up and starting to in like the scenario that I'm recording. So under that song should be generate like or for Sanjon and under the even taking away the weapon from Sanjon is like the scenario that I'm so the ambition for that strong and realistic candidate after or for a bad in terms of deciding to make Sangon suffer. Where the different Sangon who be an injured and defeated and sad situation at that point in an all confident manner that strong and realistic candidate and at that point walking towards the spring failure at that point and that storms to me and then it be able to select the baby at that point. I'm going to the independent guy that will just select stock like the storms to me and then during that connect the independent guy as well getting more forward. I think that is like the scenario that I'm looking for. And another thing is that from realistic to reality getting so close to the baby that both I'm gonna like the independent guy being defeated by him and side and at that point after different to given that means so we finally building up with courage and attempting to stop that from swinging candidate. And I'm looking at that point that make that's going to be gathered and using that weapon getting up eliminating himself. That will be how that can really get eliminated like there. And each time the baby be screen keeps on screen to something during this exact time the scenario also being was me or entering back into the civilian building or like most like a air ventilation and also like from the outside. So like I'm doing like has like if we continue through like the air ventilation and the pathway like uh path to like make it to like the observe to like eliminate it or like once a path like and put through the ventilation and network like it will be like the stream of the baby that will be catching instantly talking catching up attention is like to that so like more that way that will be doing that pathway through like their ventilation and the network as the neuron at that point will be exactly at that location on top of like the Squid Game candidate or just like the scenario and it should be that like the scenario that so like neuron at that point you're like the frame perfect baby that and neuron at that point should have like will be jumping down to like the Squid Game candidate and basically from there like that that uh, that strong and stick text in Canada is standing right in front of like the way that I'm different that it would be that neon that would be at that point would be that maybe eliminating that strong civilian candidate and saving the area that was effective scenario that I'm going to bring. So like at that point and at that point so I was saying that hearing like the sound of that neon that weapon at that point center bring that the light in like the civilian candidate and instantly getting turned on a flat scenario that I'm remembering. And I'm looking like to that giving like weapon to like Sanjon in an unfair manner, like I'm looking due to this reason as well. I'm looking that the scenario might have been in that one like to be turning off in that studio and red room, the might not be any studio worker standing there like the scenario that presently within like the studio and red room might be the case. So like hearing like the sound of that neon black weapon while neon is eliminating like that strong generate like and saving the baby like at that point itself like the lights being turned on electricity generator. And at that point, till the like neon probably using a weapon and take and from instantly destroying like the CCTV cameras and electricity and there was like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like at that point, I'm looking for like along with like the baby like electricity and other things like it was really like the India like Sanjyon as well as like then you can die, strategy of the weapon that electricity and other things like the scenario that I'm looking for. Like seeing like the situation like neon definitely would be totally prioritizing like giving that absolute priority to that rescuing like that baby more than anything else, even more than like taking down that of the certain member. So like that way, like I'm like you know totally that getting into that air ceiling air ventilation network and basically that way that getting that the baby as well and basically that getting putting up that sound on a left and when guy as well into that air ventilation network area and then the coming that scenario to be that that and you're totally telling them to like follow them and basically that way all of them that will be going through that ventilation network and like and the people that near at that point won't be able to uh, make it out of the stadium building through that exact exit area from which like near right now that has like entered into back into the stadium building because of that basically that near having to do uh, this lack of landing to make it to that air ventilation exit area. So like I'm talking that you're deciding to like take a totally different exit pathway from out of the Syrian building. But like I'm getting in that pathway, like the situation would be that there should be that for that pathway definitely that there the appendage network would be leading to and they are like into that different exit pathway like normally you having to like face CCTV camera would be that the case is definitely not to like exit from its be able to through that alternate pathways definitely well so like that would be the situation so like I'm still near to save the baby like near taking that alternate exit pathway and that and near and like not like the independent guide and like baby like totally like dropping down from that air ventilation unit and basically they are like that's the most first time that it would be near that will be dropping down and like straight away you're going to be using would be like eliminating like both few that that would be this few that might be after like the moment neon will be dropping down the like neon to be came out those two like the scenario that I'm also doing. So and like neon that typically getting that sun your as well as and at that point self like neon would be that even destroying electricity camera as well but like I'm looking like in that area as well but like I'm even at that point like I'm feeling like it's still like the alert happening for like info that is with has to that exactly things were like the student candidate and basically that way like I'm just going like in your and only flex them that will be making it out and from that point on over to next like let's say it will be nearby so like I'm doing like them making it out of that studio building at that point of next scenario that I'm but I'm leaving more to that was like and even before that was like that Sanjana to us like 2020 like before like you want to be getting the out of lecture game building and like you want in a more calculative manner like basically deciding to that uh, to ensure that exit route out of any can identify like what will happen. So like I'm not to ensure that like I'm putting like your don't be maybe like by moving through that as like from like the screening and everything they will be moving through that ventilation pathway like I'm putting like your telling that your telling that and one guy as well as trying to like station and in like that ventilation pathway and that your totally quickly make it to like certain object the officer and like when at that point like the officer will be most likely present that like scenario that I'm like you know that I've just like suddenly that jump down to that of the room and that kind of something like and you're only threatening like the officer to eliminate like the officer and you're only that getting the information as to that out of like the officer as to like where exactly is the keys to like the code the previous like the officer and will reveal to like send the like the team after like the past shooting candidate. So like I'm doing like there will be even more boats that in a place in that taken on location sort of like okay studio man it might be the case in the plane of the so that way like when you're getting the information of like where the keys to those notes are like placed in the exact room where those keys to like the boats are placed in and like usually you're getting that information out of the doctor and you're the moment that you'll be getting that information out of the doctor, like you straight away like the scenario that I'm going to bring and I'm going to bring like that location of the key would be that and like a nearby location to that of the code. It's also like about that so that will like involve quickly getting those keys and getting back to that urban division area like the scenario that I'm meeting up with like Sanjon and Sanjon and like then that comes from them that way making it out of like from that through that organization pathway like from like them through such an alternate exit like then make it out of it to give the like the scenario that I'm going to and I'm you know before eliminating it also getting out like information as for like where like the both meant for like game workers are even get hidden in like the stadium and that way like I'm like you know and also be running and running to make it to that location like the scenario that I'm for it. So I'm looking for like by sheer points of like exactly as they like running toward like that location like I'm putting that in the of making it there like I'm putting that it will be that them out there running into that jump out of like the scenario jump out and like that in the team number is like the scenario that I'm putting on it. So like I'm putting like the scenario to be that within that time during that time like what might have happened in the case of Janho and like the legal like Janho and like in their teammate while they were in the airport in like the sea then appearing as like and hearing I know it's like that noise might have been like the sound of like the boat of like the approaching fast being and like and like after like here you don't have like told like the pound to being candidate to like escape by himself might be the case. So like I'm like it might have been like a scenario where like he might have by trying to like escape might have by SharePoint might have ended up running into like that location where like the boat of that jump out boat and jump and like that in the thing on the boat might have been the case that event. So like once like the first three candidate in like the student worker Unicorn have that made it close to that board like at that point so confident like jump out as well as like the team member of like jump out might have from like the sides of their boat, like they might have like pointed the weapon and like the top to bring and then and might have like into like stop. Might have been what might have happened. So like I'm doing at that point like the father worker like we ended in like still game worker uniform and different might have been really trying to like convince that convince that like done for that like he's not connected to like game that electric so while the interaction might have been happening, like I'm doing what might have happened would be that maybe the computing platform is catching up to that to the fast food candidate and then from my distance like I'm doing that eliminating that the fast food candidates like now that I'm doing that because like the name of the premises for like there to be a sniper among like the Pacific sniper member and the Pacific like the scenario that I'm in that way like the fast food candidate like getting eliminated from like the scenario that I'm making and at that point self I'm doing like Janho as well as like the team member of like Janho being shot and like them technically hiding in Janho. That's like the scenario that I'm in. So like at that point, I'm from like the opportunity in Janho parking their boat next to the boat of that were like Jumbo hiding it and like them quickly entering infiltrating into like the boat were like Jumbo and like seeing nobody hiding it and like them quickly infiltrating and like them uh, while they during their infiltration of like Jumbo and like that injured team member like I'm using that only uh, managing to like take out all of like the team members of like the few team except for like the single number might be the case definitely friend and I was maybe like a positive that during that like attempt like maybe that banning the single team member of like Jumbo getting eliminated in that form definitely meant anyway like I'm saying like while luckily with that single game worker like I'm saying like them only threatening that single game worker and like by taking that single game worker on that court of that particular team member sitting next to them totally making it finally making it to like game I did with like the scenario that I was like so like at that point I was like them so that way, like I'm something like right me and like kind of and like the same guy and also with like the lady like was trying to was running and trying to like find out uh towards like the location where like about to be them instead like why she have points of like ending up running into like jump out. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. So definitely jump out or like jump out along with like finger team members like of jump out like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like and at that point, there's some people like Jumbo being absolutely shocked at seeing like Sangyeon holding the baby and then like Jumbo straight away telling Sangyeon that they have to like they're both being like so close nearby for them like to get on like the boat and escape from the game and just like this scenario that I'm and like Jumbo telling Sangyeon that we'll take care of this and organize like the scenario that I was so at that point, I was referring that New York will be frantically even asking Jumbo as to like how they made to like to get and all that. And at that point, I was and New York will be like worried and New York will be talking about like the fast cooking candidate. And I was referring like even though New York at that point will be still wearing that like red studio and like still for like Jumbo like even while they would be seeing that along with like Sanjay and the studio worker like also running along with like Sanjay holding the almost like they were only straight away, Janho was straight away assuming that like that the doctor is on that side of that Sangyo. It's definitely been very much so like that way that Janho won't be attacking New Orleans like person out there. And like then like New Orleans asking all this stuff to like Janho and New Orleans would be even asking like Janho if he had seen like this Squid Game worker in like the single Squid Game worker writing a book that will be along the line like New Orleans would do were really asking like Jumbo. But like at that point, like even though Jumbo we knowing that like like asking about like the past game just that asking about that game of who and at that point the from Jumbo even realizing that basically that personally like the studio uniform was not in was in fact actually what he was trying to convince them was actually true and he was like and scary being get it and all that like and hopefully shockingly realized oh like just like worried questions that like would be asking that jump about like the past to get it. But like I was doing like jump on that point only lying to like Neo and like jump out totally telling lying to like Neo and telling Neo that basically he was only able to like make it to like the game island because like their foreman was like a traitor and was like connected to that was good. So like they had interrogated like the boatman to make it to like the game island and the along the lines jump at that point will be lying to like Neo and jump at that point and at that point, I'm not sure that John would be telling Sandra to like quickly go and take the boat and basically escape. And like at that point, I'm not sure like you know, a little bit of the staring at like Jumbo and like the some like entertaining number of like Jumbo, just like scenario that I'm doing. And like Jumbo while telling Sandra and the others to like escape from his game and then that like Jumbo will be telling them that like that they will take the Jumbo take care of it and to to the ingredients and all that. But like at that point, like Neon would be staring at like Jumbo, seeing that how it's only just Jumbo and that even like the thing of Jumbo like that is so definitely like Neon would be telling Jumbo that like he won't be able to take out like the studio just with like such a small thing small and the thing would be like Neon would be telling Jumbo. So like at that point I was like Neon quickly like calling out to like Sanjon and basically Neon going up to like Sanjon and basically like told the accounting from the baby and Neon telling Sanjon about like that exact hospital name of like that exact hospital in like the mainland where that girl is like unmet is like admitted in school like Neon so that they don't really want to like save and especially for that I'm thinking another them so that like Neon might have been working as like a swim back in like the 20s games where like Sanjon had even was like totally willing to like even given up like all give up all that reward money just to like save songbook. And like so since like Neil would have totally witnessed that like definitely Neil would be totally absolutely certain that there's all that goodness within like Sanjo. So like Neil was straight away having that trust on like Sanjo. And basically and like Neil totally would be telling Sanjo that like Sanjo has to like about like this girl who's like unwell at this like exact name of like that hospital. And it's the Neil totally taking Sanjo to like okay one Sanjo will make him back to like the mainland like for like Sanjo to like save that girl would be along the ninth like and something that. And he was at that point he created and big to that Sanjo with fear like the scenario that I'm looking at like Sanjo would be like totally assured and doing that promise to like Neo that like he will definitely like say that like the scenario that I was. So like that way like I'm looking like. And at that point, I'm looking like Neo totally saying this, and and that point, once like I don't promise Neo at that point, Neo was really happy and leave. And Neo was straight away running back towards like Jumpo and like telling Jumpo that basically Neon knows all the pathways and things through like this wedding. And like Neon knows how to that without Neon's help that it would be hopeless for like Jumpo to be along the lines like Neon would be telling Jumpo. And like Neon will be up in Jumpo if like backup is like arriving to like Jumpo. So like at that point definitely Jumpo will be at that point will be really like to like Neon that basically we are like basically that because like definitely the fundamental in Jumpo is something that like Jumpo would have eliminated that the pursuit team. And that might have while interrogating and threatening that single pursuit team member that and that and threatening him to like take the to like pursuit game. And during that point like I'm saying like during that interrogation like Jumpo might have also like token might have gotten the information as to like the exact location coordinates of like so like straight away like I'm looking like at that like Jumpo might have called like the police chief. And at that point itself, like the police chief might have, when like the police chief might have picked up the pillow, or like if it was something the police chief might have been like by then he might have made it feel like the police station, and he might have been in such an absolute shock situation already at that point. See like the like red uniform of like the stadium of the which like Detroit had like basically and like the mom and everything, and he will be like listening to like this like everything Mr. Detroit has to say like so. To be in such a situation that like the police chief would be in a shock situation that like of like that realization that when that time like jump off what's right that like it will understand that the policy can even change the first for even telling friendly telling like, the policy trying to convince like the policy and the policy straight away telling them that he's totally convinced and them straight away telling him about like the location coordinates of the city. And straight away at that point he like the policy along with like a few states like basically would be leaving like the mainland just like those scenarios that actually and Mr. Choi would be like totally desperate and adamant about like him as well wants to go along with that. It's definitely not so that way like Choi as well as then or like getting into like a few single boards or like getting multiple more likely multiple boards like anything like they will be sitting up on like the mainland just like those scenarios that and so like this would be what like at that point like John Holt would be telling me on as like backup on their way. So like they have to like hold on until like hold on and prevent like uh prevent like the Sugi workers from that being able to like chase after and make it towards like Sanjon the escape is like Sanjon and Lungkunda will be along the lines of from that Jumbo will be telling me it's like the scenario that so like that way like I'm just from that Sanjon and like when you like baby like taking the boat and escape from the game. And then I'm just like so at that point like Neo straight away like telling Jumbo about that this location are like all the phone connected like games are like basically are set up in that game. And so like straight away New York as well as Jumbo going there and basically will be hiding there after that intent to like basically one that's an expectancy to see like about this year for like Sanjon's board like at that point itself like for them to like make it impossible and way basically that way to like eliminate like any percentage that might attempt that. So that way like something that one like New York and Jumbo would be going up to that location of that secret port and like the CGM and then like and they will be hiding there like at that point I'm like Jumbo getting the biggest of like it being like the front man along with like a bunch of like looking workers that will be in like the middle of the night will be quickly like showing up and basically will be quickly trying to get to that the boat there like the scenario that I'm over on the right because like from in both point of view this whole situation would be would be seen, from in-house point of view, like info will be in-house higher priority at that point would be definitely because like the VIPs will get all their sleep and the VIPs will get only unaware of all these like situations that would have happened, like the singing and report and all that about like the escaping of like your and and all that stuff. Remembrance. So like from in-house point of view, like the biggest priority. So like at that point, like the biggest priority would be to like before sunrise, like before like the VIPs later to like ensure that like for like info to be able to like catch up to like sundown and prevent sundown escape, either be able to like prevent sundown like escape or that or like to eliminate sundown and they should be by the time like the VIPs would be waking up like for info to either have like the VIPs think that basically that this like whole flash happened and to turn the story for like info like turn the story and tell like the VIPs that comments like the VIPs that is we don't like the middle of the night like before clash having happened in like the darkness that like speaking candidate or amplifying in like all the speaking candidates that detecting in that either touch the story or like to capture and bring Sanjay back to that speaking candidate or bring Sanjay and like maybe back to that speaking candidate was before morning before like sunrise before like we just wake up and that way to like declare Sanjay and like the lady as like the winner of like the 2024 studios that way. And that way to like respectively, I think would be around the line that info would be planning and would be like plan an ultimate priority at that point. So like I'm looking at like from an element like I'm speaking of the quickly trying to get into that the both from that box. Like I'm looking at that point. So like at that point I'm looking like the team of like John Hope as well as me over that absolute sense like taking out like those studio of would be getting on the bad point but at the same time won't be eliminating like the from like scenario that I'm doing. And jump it will be solely like jump for telling me all that basically that like jump having high priority to like okay to totally capture and interrogate and get out all sorts of like when he's also done like jump will be totally putting on the fake acting while still hiding like the truth that like like jump out that product from Neo that jump will be telling me all that it's that will be necessary for like the investigation into like the game side to prevent like to put permanent stop like to the games like taking place in other countries as well. Like definitely the interrogation of like the frontman was like absolutely essential. So definitely like Jumbo that we're talking into telling into like agreeing with like Jumbo to like eliminate all the game workers but to like but not like the frontman and to like jump up yeah frontman. Like the case definitely remember so like at that point I'm looking at so that stealthy ambush attack like Neon the team of like Neon and Jumbo that okay eliminating like the game of us and like that way it will be that info the frontman info that will be all along there just and the team capture that point is like the scenario that I'm looking so like I'm looking like Jumbo would be the only thing that finally he has like particular like capture like and save it in her would be along the lines like jump over things so like I'm looking like while this sort of interaction between like the format and like jump and neon would be happening like at that point I'm looking at the great alliance of like jump and neon getting that absolute unexpected shock scenario where like I'm like definitely I'm like the format would have like had his own strategy that Info would have had his own strategy but like while Info as well as like Info might have anticipated maybe of like such a worst case scenario. So like I'm looking what Info might have told Info might have split it up like the remaining studio members so that like basically like Info and like the remaining studio members so this was going to like the form and basically and to have like the team lead of like the set of studio members like would be on stand to be on standby and basically so to that form in case that something in case like maybe something goes wrong that you know with such a strategy like I'm doing that info solely using and that way like I'm doing while uh Jan Ho and Neo bit of the thing that like it came over for that the format and basically that they have finally captured like the format so like at that point I'm going to bring like without me creating like the team lead of the season of the like basically would be like showing up to like support and then like taking out not linear but also jump like personality therapy. That way I'm going maybe I'm going to that way like not linear but like jump will get eliminated. At that point it's like the scenario ceremony, right? And at that point I'm going to bring like remember that to be thinking about to like a certain extent still for like info at that point like even more of a priority than that for like info at that point will be to like probably mine will be totally focused on like as soon as possible like capture expansion and getting Sanjay and maybe that to that Brilliant candidate from before like some point that like I'm doing that info like quickly like ordering like the Brilliant numbers quickly get on like the board and I'm doing it then starting with the board and like them that way on the chain to like catch up like Sanjay's like personality that I'm looking. So like exactly like that very same radar kind of thing that that shows the location with the board. So these in like Sanjay's case will them as well know finding out about like that location sensor present in that code like in that board as well like scenario that is so like tracking that like I'm just like info as well as like the game of this will be like chasing after like uh, Sanjay's board is like the scenario that and that way like I'm like eventually I'm looking that it was like yeah like I'm by the like Sanjay's like board would have made it to a lot of distance and that and by the time like his board would be finally catching up to like Sanjay's board like I'm different like at that point like the clash happening and I mean in that clash like and something like it was totally eliminating like the gun like front. That's like scenario that I'm not really connect. So uh, that way like at that point I was pretty like once like then the gun guys will be getting eliminated at that point like Sundown bit only shot. Because like at that point I'm like Sundown rotating that easily that came over but like even after all this effort like really still like Sundown and like the baby would be at this point would be getting taken back to like the to get bidding. To get on the line like Sandra will be staring at that point, especially in the friend. Because it would be at that point it would be them both alone that would be on that pole. So like and like at that point like info while thinking that like he has finally uh managed to capture like Sandra and like the baby like at that point Uncle the friend would be when like info be getting that absolute shocking twist with like and then that uh, like great number of course like approaching fast approaching that locating like the scenario that will be like the police chief choice as well as like a team of the police force like really but like definitely like the police chief most likely holding a speaker and announcing like to well announcing to like the command to like totally surrender it's like the scenario that I'm looking over like and November that of course from the training of this item is trains for like such vulnerable strategies that find a scenario where like even Neo as well as even Jumbo eventually getting eliminated but like still like but like in hope totally getting captured like by like the police chief and just like whole huge team of like police was like capturing Jumbo and arresting Jumbo. It's like the scenario that I'm also recording and my variable. So like that way like Sandra kind of was like the baby that being uh that taken to like the main line by the display when they leave that way like I'm looking like Sandra and like after making it to like the main line and like Sandra not forgetting about like the comments he would have made it to like that way like Sandra like totally ensuring that surgery of that girl uh, take place and basically that way through Sanjay's help like I'm something like that girl who was unwell like like has been getting saved and that way like and like eventually I'm going to Sanjay ending up being that father figure for like those two girls like basically Janki's daughter as well as like that first candidate as well like the scenario that I'm going to like that way like those two so I thought that way, eventually ending up having two daughters with like those figures that even with like Sangyong and calling Sangyong father. It's like even the scenario that I'm making on this like I'm not so like you know potential right now as for like the revelation right now as for like info has been back in like the 2015 like and they given like the unfair advantage of like the weapon by killing them back and like I'm definitely this might be definitely due to like one main reason for this will be definitely due to like info naturally being like the actual front of that in might definitely be the case definitely the prediction. So like this might be so main reason for that specific interest of that Ilna towards like info and in wanting that showing that special interest towards like info and Ilna wanting info himself to be like the winner of the experience in like 2015 and doing such an advantage would be definitely for like Ilna to like have that way like as like the next person to like eventually to tackle them factor and like the age like I'm just like actually in wanting like in himself to be like the next to like around like the studio definitely member previous and like for enough that would be also something that Ilham will be seeing as like something to be in a crazy manner to be that proud of to have to go some that will be that being like the to keep running like the game might definitely be the game definitely by the game. So like definitely I'm looking like it would be with the intent itself that like Ilham in like the past would have definitely even that app itself would have even destroyed like info like and info job and ended up info Ilham I'm still remember the that specific client had like that proper job that like info had in like the past who had basically gave info that money to save info for that wife and basically that way that probably that info getting from in that primary case and everything like and definitely it might have all been that definitely that's the most now so that way to that will like spiral into like that up to the question of like infos like and that way to like really trap info into that experience definitely might what might have been happened to definitely remember because like even back then like Illa might have wanted like just the next person doing like around like the experience the next higher of like just around like to be it's like some people definitely might be able so that is such an absolute realistic manner like I'm like Vilna might have done all this about which info even to the person is reported from aware of definitely might be real. But like I'm still thinking about the mention that is like info right now doing the same thing in now that and showing that patient interest towards like Sanjon and giving that advantage to that Sanjon by giving the weapon and everything will be totally definitely due to like info in like the person like having no concept or like no one purchase if they don't purchase to like info in about like that info having enough with like enough bond as well as like that could be guy who will be most likely info that the amount of bond as well as like the boardman part of who might have been like that only participant of that merge that bond language like info having absolutely not children purchase to like info as well as like info wanting like into higher for like the students like to uh for info to like probably set like things up for like such animation scenario like really for from info point of view definitely around like on your like that page as well would have the like game like the current within work to me so that like info would only see that single scenario that only once like like goal would definitely like ensure that like, once that baby can also and on into like another like at that point to have like that person like upon to be the next higher and run like the students from that point on like to so like info to like pass on like the product to run like students to that have especially and while that golden secret code that might so takes us which like which like might have been like the biggest one of the biggest priority for like not only in numbers also for like info as well for in like inverse event might have learned of things that basically the only person deserving to like be the next half to like around like the CDN uh, to be that quality necessary requirement is definitely for that person to definitely be an next CDN winner definitely maybe the so like for that requirement as well to be satisfied all through that Sanjong and also the really winning category what game would be definitely what like info would be definitely I don't think right now it's definitely to pretty much now sitting on okay, so like definitely on preemption right now is that Sanjong right now is struggling to eliminate like the elements to be generated and that Sanjong even think that failure of like in the still my preemption for like right now for like Sanjong to continue to it and like Sanjong that eliminating like to be generated like one by one. Just like the scenario that I'm looking at. I'm still remembering for it to be that exceptionally strong and realistic kind of like being candidate who will be like one like I'm going to be attempting to like eliminate him. It's only at that point that like Sanjong like this whole attempt of me starting to like backfire. Like the scenario that I'm thinking of and then okay, so like definitely on preemption right now with that Sanjong right now not being able to do it like and so definitely I'm right now for the maybe of the development of that definitely so that was this game actually happening and basically yeah like I'm looking at that in like good game flag solely due to that the unfair advantage that signed on around those of like him having the black weapon like and something like that making it possible for like Sanjo in like the game to be able to ensure like the protection of that the lady. There's like also like enemies of scenario that was right now on so like opinion right now, like in like the officers room that is trying to like access like the computer. They are like computer definitely so like the computer in like office room will be having a lot of power. Like definitely understand the power like vehicle that turn off like the light, like the entire of this game building as well as like access to through that compress that might be probably possible as well as like even like while like the physical game will be taking place like there are different considering the different game of the public like really seeing some kind of like rotating platform kind of like a skill game for like what the skill game might be like at like a huge height like elevated position like being like a bunch of like rotating platforms and basically like for like the skill game candidate like the targeted skill game candidate like kind of like basically means as well as like the range. And for like the remaining skill game candidates will like make it towards the pro that by jumping from one rotating platform to another rotating platform being such an extreme hard stuff will be like the actual thing of that that behind that thing that was given by like this game workers as for like something to like definitely remember the actuality of like the depth of like the difficulty behind this would be would be stacked a little bit of the on side of that towards like the skill game candidate majority skill game candidate and like if you like the targeted skill candidates that it will be like getting to them that like would be the hardest part for like doing certainly something. Yet like I'm something like definitely for like me or through the access of like this computer and like how to program different like definitely I'm preferring like definitely for like mechanical movement like being definitely a part of like this skill game. Definitely memory retention. So like I'm preferring in that skill game definitely me or messing with like the computer like I'm different of we are setting in like stopping that moment of like and stopping like the free game like basically doing that actually doing that so like like access of that computer like of the rooms that scenario that happen. Yet like I'm different kind of like neo like in a casual manner like dropping down that like frames of like that ventilating pathway like to like down towards like the definitely I'm different like the officer would be like would have okay already seen it and basically might be talking sitting on a fake acting as if like he hasn't seen it. It's like the scenario that I'm missing of the topic. So like Liam was referring so like a total clash happening between like Neo and like the officer in which like I'm looking initially like the officer to be totally or Neo like the scenario that I'm looking for. Yet like I'm looking like Neo in like a stealthy manner would be like turning things around and like would be ending up most likely definitely eliminating like the officer like the scenario that I'm looking for. And after that like I'm looking like Neo will be straight away and like accessing like the computer in like the office room and basically would be changing all of the things up and most likely or most likely turning off like the entirety of like the power in like the entirety of the game building as well as like stopping like the mechanical movement of like the studio and everything is like changing the scenario that I think is also quite fun and strange. Okay, so like the movement range right now is for like neon as for like how like neon will be attending like the like the hard copy of like other parts of the candidate in like the captain's room into the like I'm so different like neon right now for the tying up like the officer and pushing into like an different kind of like in like the officer's on the road and that while in the on the like putting on like the officer like tuning up and that way like after like neon probably trying to like infiltrate into like the information about like questionnaire that about the role thing. So like while in hope in the of away from this like room something like because at that point that like in like neural would be only tell me or would be trying to like integrate into like the office of the room and actually into like the front man's like room and like they are like as like neural would be by the time like Neon will be succeeding in like anything like the hard copy like and the still like the info would be like from an info would be finding out about it and would be ending up eliminating Neon like the scenario element. So like that means that even though Neon should be succeeding in like anything like the hard copy of like the player 246 like at that point I'm also bring like player 246 like basically like the path to get it that way uh basically getting saved from like basically like from like the classes of like info and basically that from that way like people that basically connect all the people process to that and all of the people that are like process to like the thoughts being generated or being saved from like info it's like the scenario that I'm looking for here like I'm looking like still like in that process for that the anything like the hard copy like getting eliminated by the government it's like the definitive scenario that I'm doing like and like the and yet like I'm the first to see the mission for like the even for new like sacrifice like I'm thinking, like still won't not being able to like save like the powers being able to like the individual scenario where I'm still I'm looking like the elimination of like the powers being candidate like only happening in front of like example of that scenario that I'm again definitely at that point even like finally just hold me convinced that like I'm the friends got each other only at that point being convinced that basically even though the past game candidate isn't currently in like the red game of the uniform still like the fact that like she's not a still game worker and that is like the still game candidate like and it will be only at the moment of like about the game candidate like elimination that like will be finally getting convinced with like still keeping out that about the thing and at that point I was like in like the past game candidate like one moment and so like it's only taking to like jump to like save just like a dot and that in even revealing the hospital's name and like daughter's name like when another direction. That way like when it would be such a passing of information in like that one moment of like what's being generated that would be not even to the other something in like that suffering of like that talk of like the passing being generated like what eventually happening through like Sangyo it's like the through jump through Sangyo's like exactly the scenario that I'm the and my particular okay, so like the middle question right now is for like this game being related to the like three towers of that triangle the next one the next steps on the side like only to bring up like how the game will be like and bring out it will be like the circular tower which would be like meant for like the target because of its shape being circular like that's being on the boundary area of that circular shape that can like climbing on top of like that step and making it to like the very top and that returning from like the very top to that the bottom of that tower in like the circular shape would be a lot harder when compared to that entering and making it to climbing all the way to like the top and returning back down from like the both the triangle as well as like square shape because of that the steps like on the border being on the border of like straight shape unlike the circular shape of like the circle tower is definitely memorable. So like climbing up and like getting down in through the step through the way to top and getting down in like the circular tower will be taking a lot more time than that climbing up and getting down in like the case of like the circular tower as in the case of like the square tower as well as like in the case of like the triangle tower might be the case definitely not the so like my best impression of like how exactly this game will be the different seems like the target are like some young into and like the daily like the task for like the targets would be to like one like the game begins for them to successfully be able to like climb to that for 100 speed to be able to like successfully be able to like and then for different for to not be a team based game at all. It will be only an individual game. So like the task would be for like the target three of them to like climb and make it to like the very top of like the circular uh, circular tower and basically be able to like return back to like the very bottom of like the circular tower before like the time runs out and also before like the remaining civilian candidates like usually climbs up and to the very top and makes it to the very bottom of both like the triangle tower as well as like the square tower. Might be the case definitely when to like if Sangyon is able to like do that before like the other the student candidate the with like that Sangyon like Mitsu as well as like maybe gaining up to like the winner of like the 60 game might be the case definitely the selection. So like this might be how like the 60 game would be like it's definitely might be the so like the playing of the Anderson right now, it's definitely go like in like the game definitely which like the old man thinking candidate is like it's really old like and actually won't be the point of scenario to be like not being able to like climb up and get down from like the towers like in a quick manner. Definitely able to like definitely able to bring like the journey of like the old man singing candidate like like get it ending with like the game with like the very first triangle tower that definitely able to bring it. So definitely able to bring like that realistic strong Indian candidate that will be pushing like the old man Indian candidate and that due to that in like wasting that time would be around the lines of offering that I think would be like in that reason and that way like I'm thinking it would be that realistic strong candidate that would be like eliminating pushing and eliminating that old man speaking candidate is like the scenario that I'm looking and I'm just bring like by the time that I'm just bring like the scenario to be that by the time that the triangle tower would be the first triangle tower would be done by like the remaining speaking candidates. At that point, I'm just bring like by the time that the second tower will be climbed like I'm just bring will be by the time that the triangle tower will be over, I'm just bring that only three among like the targeted teams will be remaining and like among like three to be like that villain stick strong figure candidate as well as like the independent guy as well as like one another figure candidate against that will be remaining separately on the front. And I'm just putting like in like second square power then like I'm just putting like that third figure candidate like would be eventually getting pushed to like the scenarios that I'm just going for it. And like I'm different than like that then I'm just bringing that it most likely being like a whole fight and struggle happening between like and pushing happening between like the Indigo and guy as well as like the villains like strong stealing candidates like the scenario that I'm in which like I'm finally like the Indigo and guy is like stealing journey as well getting over the like that strong villains like pushing candidate like okay overpowering and managing to like push like the Indigo and guy uh, and I'm just putting like that way I'm just putting to be that villains like strong stealing candidate that will be like eliminating like the Indigo and guy as well from like the second uh, from like the second tower of like the square tower like the scenario that I'm going to do it and I'm looking at the scenario to be like as like Sangyong's team will be like probably struggling to like make it sound like I'm looking at the scenario to be like really like even before like Sangyong's team would be like making it down off from like the circle tower like I'm looking at that villain stick that I'm afraid that villain stick strong to get candidate who be alone remaining in like that out could be even surprising like Sangyong team and basically that as like that villain stick that strong thinking candidate would be almost about to make it to would be almost about to make it to completing like the second tower of the square tower and would be about to win like the 60 game at that very last second is when I'm looking like Sangyong probably using that weapon and basically throwing that weapon and like that way like I'm like it will be that weapon that will be eventually resulting in like and that way that unfair in a, such an unfair manner of using that weapon would be how like I'm looking like Sangyong would be winning the would be taking out like that and eliminating that strong gymnastic civilian candidate and that way like the team of like Sangyon that's the baby and Minsu feeling like the students like scenario that and definitely have to bring like in Minsu's case like I'm definitely Minsu would be totally having that extreme clear taking it while climbing up like the circular towers like the scenario that and this fear of that Minsu and the spring that totally resulting in like absolute precious time a lot of like absolute precious time of like Sangyon and the baby being lost. This like the scenario that I'm looking at. And like so I'm going to be getting extremely frustrated and enraged and be even thinking and she's thinking along the lines of like putting into so that like Sangyong could save the baby, but like still I'm looking like still I'm looking exactly like how in that unfair advantage of that giving the weapon to like Sangyong by like involved which like Sangyong of like basically to eliminate like during night to like eliminate like the figure characters, which like Sangyong fit into like I'm in a similar manner like I'm talking both Sangyong with the only thing of like basically eliminating Minso to that like Sangyong thing like save the day. Still I'm different like Sangyong totally not doing that. It's like the scenarios that I'm looking at. Sangyong totally managing to like even though shouting like a extreme shouting and the Sangyong finally managing to like give all the strength and courage to so finally succeeding in that and I'm finally in that way Sangyong speak like basically eventually ending up winning like the studio definitely and that as well as like Sangyong like using the like weapon against like that strong villanistic studio candidate like will be eventually what would be resulting in like Sangyong's team like that way barely managing to like even though in an unfair manner like ending up winning like the game is like the scenario with the scenario that is something on down the so like that way like I feel like and about like Sangyong and like really like I'm like Minso as well winning like the game is like scenario that I'm playing Also, the minimum mission right now is like even from like the officer's room itself, like not taking the advantage of like the uniform of like the famous guys as like the officer, like the friend will get also able to like most likely like the officer from not being able to don't find anything to like tie up like the officer to an important kind of like state. Yeah, like when the brain was exactly for like at this point, like even with like the class getting like the officer and like in like the section like definitely like eliminating up and the second eliminating it so still at that point like not even bothering to like put on the guys as like because like there will be CCTV cameras in all those areas that leading to like the and even within like the and everything is definitely my super interested. So definitely like ensuring that while in like the resume of that specific worker itself like basically like goal would be to like would be speed and basically to make to that room of like the front man where like that hard copy would be and like basically even like the front man would be present there like to like throw force to like something um to try attempt to like even eliminate even if it's through like the elimination of attempting like the elimination like front man for like to like definitely when it is through Neon's sacrifice, like the only thing like Neon's mind at this point would be to like actually ensure that before she gets that eliminated to like delete that hard blocking. Uh, definitely might be the case, definitely necessary. Okay, so like the minimum preemption right now for like how like the best to get to like with like all and it is being taken to like the very top of like the square the end of our like and bring like the task would be for like not the target but like the trying on the baby as well as like in this case but like the task and actual thing would be for like the remaining speaking candidates but like they would have to like jump and make it to from like the top of like very top of like the yellow square tower so you have to like they might have like them and make it to like the top of like the triangle blue tower and from like the top of like the triangle blue tower they have to like the figure and then have to like jump and make it to like the top of like the circular red tower might be the case and from like the circular red tower like before like the timer or count like they may have to uh like take the lift and basically go to like the very bottom of like the circular uh tower and they use then from there like they might have to like so they are seeing all that stuff surrounding like the outsides of like of like each tower like I'm doing the task to be for like the remaining Indian candidates while this entire time like Sanjon speculating as well as like I mean so would be have to do absolutely nothing and stay on top of like the uh or on top of like the yellow square tower like I'm doing at what like the remaining Indian candidates like after making it to the circle of tower like they might have to like take the and if we go to like the very bottom of the circle of tower and like climb like the stairs on the side and make it to like the very top of like the circle of the top of the steps of like circular tower and if we go down from like the very top of like circular red tower and if we then quickly go up to like the next floor uh, triangle tower and basically climb up like the steps uh, on the sides of like the blue uh, triangle tower all the way to like the very top and basically once again make it back to like the bottom of like the blue triangle tower and then quickly rush before the time for them to like quickly rush up to like the final um, final yellow square tower and basically climb up like step to climb up to like the very top of like the very top of like the square yellow tower to like the very top platform where like Sangyong and like Minse and like the baby will be and like basically for them to like make it to like the very top platform and basically from there to like for them to like only eliminate like the target before like the time runs off would be that much of like an extreme like task like to get task would be and like all the work would be for like not the targets but like for all the remaining civilian candidates who had selected like the target. Definitely might be the case, definitely not different. So like right now with like Sangyong also having like a weapon like I'm looking for like the scenario to be like right now I'm looking like the scenario to be like for eventually like by the time like the civilian it should be climbing like the final third yellow square tower like a clash happening between like that storm beneath it and like 21 day and I'm looking right now for like for most likely the that 21 guy that if we like only or for and pushing that and eliminating like that really stick and strong speaking and like 21 guy before like the time runs out will be struggling his way into like climbing up the top of like that yellow tower and I'm also bring like at that point like I'm like maybe like Minso probably telling Sangyon to like Minso will only there and Minso will only telling Sangyon to like probably do something. But like I'm sort of before like time comes out like I'm while only 10 seconds to be remaining I'm just like 20 guy making it to like the top of like towards the Sangyon and Minso and like very heavy. And like then the guy by then will be so badly injured and badly exhausted and will be body struggling to even walk and like make it towards like Sanjay like it's a way. Still I'm also like Sanjay won't be at all attacking and like then the guy and then so it always scared as well. So like at that point I'm also thinking that could be when like I'm trying Sanjay getting that absolute shock of that realization that like this entire time that even like the Indigo guy basically after that basically after like the fourth game like that absolute deep guilt, the feeling of guilt and regret has happened to like the individual guy to like the point that like absolute extreme change has happened to like the individual guy that like basically in like the first game like basically of like the good game like the fact that like the individual guy did even by Sandron like totally willing to like return back to like even when time was like so short and like the jump of was like just swinging at such high speeds like even by Sandron was like totally willing to like go back to like save Janti like the fact that like the individual guy wasn't feeling at all and had like self-esteem same himself like Sandron at that point was the interferences to game like I'm like would be properly realizing that it was that the individual guy is genuinely here so much about like the radio that like it was like then like consciously prioritizing just like survival over junkies so that like he could like ensure that basically Sangyong and basically like the baby like basically switch like to six gamers that makes it to like the six game like the six game and that way it's able to like make it back safely to like the main like to ensure that like but like it's only there to like ensure what's happened like then different guy in like the first game had like prioritized himself and like basically had like left behind like he would be along the lines of like that shocking realization that like Sanjay would be having and like then the one guy even like in like the voting after like the history game like the one guy even voting to like continue to like the game that as well being due to like being part of this for like then the one guy that basically the voting would be result would be definitely to continue playing the games regardless of like then the one guy regardless of this like when the one guy even wants to like leave the game. So like basically by wanting to like continue playing like games to like to that way trick for the remaining speaking candidates who wants to like I think like the majority who wants to like continue like playing like games to like only trick them into thinking that like when the one guy is on their side and so that like that way then the one guy could like only like use that like use that to like also eventually and betray them and basically that way so that like when different guy put like those like after those like ensuring like that the baby element like on makes it back to like the mainland and like the game and makes it back to like the mainland like just much like I'm recovering like Sanjon to like only even without like 21 guys saying anything to like Sanjon about like Sanjon would be probably realizing it once like I'm even the scenario would be like 10 seconds remaining and basically the Indian guy making it to like the top like the yellow uh, square tower and get like I'm looking like and I'm looking maybe of like water that like the Indian guys still have a lot of energy while I'm looking like when so we're totally scared and I'm like into not being able to do anything against like the Indian guy and like it would be just like Sanya and like the baby and yet like I'm looking like the Indian guy but like a smile that's like a smile like only like while 10 seconds will be remaining like the Indian guy without doing anything like this, just like a smile that's only uh, just like begging and pleading to like Sanjay that basically to like take good care of like the daily like the scenario that I'm playing and that way like the time of like 10 seconds like running out and if we catch the one guy getting eliminated and that way like Sanjay like the daily and like Minsu ending up becoming like enough of it is like the which is like the scenario that I'm also playing and also the play about the everything like the sky to game and the putting like to even the options like two options and to like how like the non targets to get candidates like up to like how they would want to like how they can play like the sky to game. So also like remember the thing there will be like that two options for them to either use like the steps or like for them to like for them to either progress through like the step path to like making it to like the final tower of the yellow tower, which would be an extremely exhausting one. But the other option would be to take the what might appear as the easy path of basically after jumping from the yellow square tower to first jumping from the yellow square tower to the to the blue triangle tower to jumping to and making it to the circular tower for them to only have to basically jump back from the circular uh, red tower to the blue triangle tower to making it to jumping and making it to the yellow square tower is the scenario that I'm in. So there would be these two options, but I'm looking the hidden consequence of basically what taking the option of what might appear as the easy option of basically jumping from the top of the towers rather than taking the stairs up would be definitely naturally it would be the jumping method that would even extremely hard because while returning back towards the yellow tower it would be jumping that would be extremely hard because of the second tower of the triangle facing towards at pointy area basically facing towards the something out. So I'm putting on the return jump I'm putting at least bunch of the speaking candidates forgetting that but for the instance after be at that point one just could be revealed at that point a bunch of speaking candidates straight away I'm looking at three speaking candidates straight away thinking that basically the jumping of from the jumping method of the user method and I'm looking at least three speaking candidates attempting that jumping method and also have some feeling because of the triangle facing and pointing toward that circle cover on their return jump and the bleak none of them will be able to make that successfully make that jump because of that pointing area facing the circle cover that I'm looking at each of them that will be jumping from the top of the circle tower to the triangle tower won't be able to grab hold onto that pointing area of that triangle tower and use me that would be setting in I'm going to at least three thinking candidates straight away getting eliminated by attempting that. And that would be at that point self setting in this game. Sponsoring any thinking candidates straight away deciding to use the elevator and straight from the circle tower and straight away use that whole stair method to eventually make it to the yellow tower. It's giving the scenario that I'm right now. And I'm only pretending to know the positive that maybe 10 to 20 I think I'm figure this out straight away and maybe I'm 20 straight away. Once they would all be senior candidates will be making it to throw the jump would be making it to the circle tower at that point so 10 to 20 I figure maybe that's the conclusion after that. Then we went straight away figure see the jumping method has definitely not being open and when straight away maybe all alone already said that straight away itself on making it to the top of the circle tower itself by taking the elevator and using the stair method. It's also an engine also scenario that I'm having to make. Okay, so Dr. Flynn Crimson right now has for Neil right now being badly injured and thoroughly defeated by the officer but Neil right now crawling out away from the doctor. Neil is trying right now for Neil's strategy will be definitely to throw this for crawling would be to crawl towards making it towards the left where basically that weapon of Neil during the whole flash against the officer had fallen so I'm just saying that right now the all confidence of the officer right now getting the rest of the question after that I'm doing was I'm doing the officer right now would be by staying on side of by such all confidence putting the car down and facing away from the crawling I'm doing Neil right now but crawling her way towards the elevator and pushing the button of the elevator and I'm so by the time I'm looking at the officer would be done to this for speech and the whole dialogue and basically turning back towards Neil at that point I'm looking in getting that up talking surprise to Neil wielding the weapon that she will be getting by then from the elevator or open by then Neil picking up the weapon from the elevator and Neil will be eliminating and taking down the officer in the scenario that I'm playing. Okay, so the minimum strength right now for thanks to the thing right now ready to be the pushing skill can so I'm going right now for scenario already being cannot as this candidates as jump at or from tower to tower, but I think that it will be just the elevator that will be getting the from the tower might be the case definitely not the so definitely with so right now seeing someone hanging on to like the yellow tower, like and that would be definitely solely hallucinating, definitely not great. So like it would be the side effects of like basically the side effect would still not be that like consuming that thing from like Thanos scene might have resulted in like basically even once like the effects of like the effects of that thing that Minzu ate was over like still like Minzu totally that act like Minzu eating it might have resulted in like the side effect of like Minzu getting a lot of hallucination. Even right now might be the case with the film. So like that person hanging on to like a lot of only Minzu hallucinating stuff due to this reason I'm also spreading right now for like so and like I'm going to bring like the scenario to be like the person means will be like right now the different means of hallucination right now means of seeing like most likely Thanos or like that friend of Thanos like basically climbing up from to that yellow tower would be what Ninja would be hallucinating right now and like that resulting in like Ninja is also getting scared and I'm like Ninja is okay running towards like the remaining singing candidate and that resulting in like Ninja running towards like the remaining singing candidate and ending up that way pushing like the remaining singing candidates like out of that Ninja's fear Ninja would be only running away from the hallucination and that resulting in like Ninja colliding with like another singing candidate and in that ending up with like that other singing candidate like getting pushed off like the yellow tower reflected into and getting eliminated reflective into scenario that I'm going so like I'm doing right now for it being into that will be like the singing candidate that will be eliminating and the singing candidate in like the yellow tower. It's like the in the scenario that I'm looking for. And my personal emotion was like so I'm right now already getting targeted by like the schooling candidate. Like I'm definitely running like right now it's in of like I'm going to like for me to love just like weapon. And I'm looking for that probably keeping Sanjay for like for like definitely for like the ranking is like the scenario that I'm looking for. That way like I'm through means of how I'm looking at like the scenario to be like through means of that I'm looking at the yeah, the like half the game in like the yellow town will be getting updated like the scenario that is right. And I'm looking for for like the yellow tower game will be completed like and like once like they would be using the scenario to be like them or they using like the lifts to like go down get down from like the yellow tower. And even at that point I'm looking like Sanjon will be firmly holding on to like the weapon and would be like along with like the baby would be standing on like a corner of like that lift while like pointing like to like the remaining Indian candidates and like I'm looking like it to be like for like the scenario to be like in like the second. And I'm also bring like in like the second hour of like the final hour of the bringing like the scenario to be like also remaining Indian candidates and search for like that same strong and realistic like Indian candidate as well as like 20 guy as well as like Sangyon as well as like Minsu and like all men Indian candidate like would be like the only ones that I'm going to bring like will be surviving like the triangle tower of like the scenario that I'm looking and one like they would be like using like the lifts to like get down from like the triangle tower like at that point is when I'm looking within next that lift like I'm looking will be when exactly look that point is when I'm looking that realistic strong speaking candidate like the attacking champion and probably ending up like facing like the weapons from Jones like the scenario that I'm yet like I'm sort of like him not attacking any of the speaking candidate due to his like extreme villainous nature might be the case with even so like I'm like facing the weapon yet like I'm being totally more confident and him probably deciding to like okay wait even with like holding on to like the weapon like him deciding to like wait for like the third and final circle down from which like to walk into like post that absolute scare and in an extremely realistic manner to let of that absolute scare and fear for elimination of like certain any civilian candidates will be along the lines like every single bit of it man is like personality management and like I'm friend that way like on making it to like the top of like the circle down like a physical like him using such like weapon like most likely first eliminating like the whole man to be a candidate like the scenario that I'm right and like then next time was like him probably attempting to like eliminate Minto to like the scenario that I'm right and like as he would be attempting to like eliminate Minto and to like the one guy like totally making it smooth and like would be attacking that realistic strong Indian candidate at that point like the scenario that I'm and that way like I'm doing like Minto as well as like the Indian guy would be attempting to stop and like push like that women pick against candidates like of like the certain out of like the scenarios that I was running and so like I'm looking like then so as well as like when we going guys probably struggling and I'm looking like during the during that whole struggle I'm looking at most likely for like the uh villains being candidate like usually having and getting those into like weapon items and that resulting in like while MD guy will be probably struggling against like and will be getting offered by that winners pick like being candidate like as well when I'm like from behind like basically using the weapon and basically that thing how like I'm different like the villains take like Squid candidate to be getting eliminated yet like I'm different like even with like Minzu using the weapon like I'm different still like as like Minzu and like the Indian guy will be to get the frank like put like the villains next to game and like I'm like him grab his hold on to like Minzu and basically that way like Minzu in like the process like Minzu as well getting eliminated along with like the from the villains take screening and it is like certain scenario that everything. And that way at that point it would be just like Sangyeon, like the baby, and like then you go and die, that is the remaining. And then the almost likely 10 seconds alone remaining at that point for like the game. So it's also the clearance direction. At that point I was like definitely Sangyeon having that approach of realization that like that absolute change has happened through like the Indian guy and like the reason as to like why exactly like the Indian guy didn't help Janhi in like the first game and all that thing and the invite guy voting to like continue play the game Squid Games after like the first two game voting like basically all all the Bitcoin guy doing all that being solely to protect and save the game. Will get along the line standard and that short realization and that way like I'm looking like in like the first skill games like the winner setting up the like Sangyam and like the baby like the scenario that I'm looking all over again on the I guess like the name of the mention right now as for like in the sky to be with like into getting targets and first and like those that they can be telling them to like jump like and right now the scenario to be like the old man could be candidate alone that getting closer and closer closer and closer towards like so uh with that approach then to like steadily like push it means it's like the scenario that I'm talking but like I'm talking like while like the old man should be candidate to be getting closer and closer to it like so at that point once again like the hallucination like happening for at that point is like scenario that I'm saying in like the at that point like I'm into seeing instead of like the old man thinking candidate like I'm like into seeing like Thanos or like Thanos front at that point is like the scenario that I'm walking towards like so we along the lines like so big one game having the hallucination that point is like scenario that I'm explaining and that point is from like screaming and basically like into screaming and basically into like what like into will be panicking like there will be something that might be all that enough point within like so it's like while into the panicking that is coming out might be different that the scenario happening and like with like into at that point that will be screaming and panicking and basically running towards like the Coleman candidate or like Segway pushing like that Coleman candidate behind this like towards like backward like scenario that I'm saying and that resulting in like all the remaining studying candidates like standing behind like the old and studying candidate like getting simultaneously pushed white to be taking like all the studying candidates like the scenario that I'm saying and that like collective for lack of like a great number of Indian candidates like happening and this leads that resulting in like one among the like one Indian candidates among them like ending up falling and falling towards like the edge of like the square like the scenario that I was for again at that point itself on the like the Indigo and guy totally making his move and basically before that Indian guy who would have fallen towards like the edge of like the square tower would be like getting scared and basically would be about to like get up like I'm pushing like Chandigarh. Then you can guy at that point self like totally using his left feet and basically like that way like pushing him off and basically that way like that single Indian like get eliminated or through like that single push of like so on like Coleman city candidate. Just like to win the scenario that I was about and that is the so that way like so actually surviving like the first tower is like in the scenario that I was about the another sprint that way through that access means so that the way the remaining student candidate will pick up the things such like a weak link that would get totally instantly changing to the point of like them or the remaining student candidates like a good number of them being like would be afraid of like so and keeping away keeping a distance from things like the scenario that I'm so like in that second tower of like the triangle tower like like definitely like the whole thinking candidate would be telling that the remaining student candidate to like not target into anymore but to like keep away from it so because of like to having all that enough strength and basically that it's also panics like basically like they might not know what might happen and basically along this lines like I'm saying that thinking as like it's really unpredictable and strong so like I'm thinking government TV candidate is it only having that fear happening towards me so even after like the very first round of like the square tower where I'm like into the like with that absolute confusion to see that the all match cooking candidates like scenario that I'm bring that I'm looking bring like in like the second tower of the triangle tower like like then like the remains cooking candidates like not targeting Minso but like them keeping away from Minso and I'm also bring the old man cooking candidate like the triangle tower telling uh like taking the distance to like separate and like Sanjo and like the baby like the scenario that I'm and while they will be attempting that like I'm that we Sanjon will be putting out his like weapon to select the scenario that everything and that being such an absolute possible surprise to like this speaking candidate like the scenario that I'm looking. So like that way like I'm looking like still I'm looking like the old man speaking candidate he was really trying to like convince Sanjo and that way to like separate Sanjo from like the lady but like I'm looking like Sanjo will be like threatening them with like the weapon to like stay away. And I'm looking while this like repeated like attempt by like the old man speaking candidate to convince and like Sanjo would be happening like I'm looking like during that point like I'm looking like all the remaining speaking candidates like would be all having that focus on like Sanjo and like like the scenario that I'm looking at. And that I'm also worrying that the Bitcoin guy will be at that point to be really taking advantage of by in an extremely unpredictable manner. Like I'm looking like the Bitcoin guy will be totally pushing one of like a speaking candidate. At that point, that speaking candidate will be getting eliminated. Like the scenario that I'm doing. Because like I'm putting like scenario to be like the old man speaking candidate like only repeatedly. And like the other speaking candidate is like repeatedly trying to like convince Sanjong and like Sanjong won't be at all listening to them while pointing that the weapon at them. And basically, time would be running out more and more. And I'm looking like, it's like eventually I'm looking while 10 seconds alone to be like remaining maybe while 20 or 10 seconds alone will be remaining like I'm it be at that point that like then we go and die because of making it move and basically by all the remaining people gathered if can just focus on like 100 and basically like then we go and die. So they pushing one of like the to the Angeles like and eliminating one of its being ended and like significant guy like constantly like making up like the excuse that basically that like because like time was like so short and basically they kind of all of them get eliminated because of that Sanjay will be around the like significant guy would be making that absolute excuse. And I was putting that way like even in like the second tower of like the triangle tower like like the individual guy like that strong speaking candidate and like the old man speaking candidate as well as like Sanjay as well as like Ninja, all of them like surviving in like the second triangle tower as well. It's like the snap that I'm going for an frame. Okay, so like the minimum frame right now was like Pentagon guy using like a pole to like try to like put Ninja off and basically like Ninja right now being so extremely scared as well as enraged right now in the surface of like Ninja make it possible for like Ninja to like dot like the pole right now like the scenario that I'm going to bring and like whoever bring like manage succeeding in like dotting like the pole attack from like the Indian guy and like at that point it's like an encouragement so he like rushing and running towards like the Indian guy and only straight away with that absolute strength is pushing like the Indian guy like when you select the scenario that everything and at that point like everyone would be scared all the remaining candidates will be scared and would be gathering behind like the Indian guy getting put simultaneously like the process while like the Indian guy would be pushed behind and like one of the definitely he'll be ending up falling like real close to like the edge. And I'm looking at that point like I'm just looking I'm sure maybe like old man thinking candidate at that point like taking advantage of like that situation to like push that candidate off. And I'm looking that way like that speaking candidate getting eliminated. And like it's so totally shocking everyone and even including like Tintin guy and Sanjona basically. That way like I'm like them probably seeing no more from that point of seeing Minso at all as like a weakling and instead like them all having that we are setting it towards like Minso and would be from that point on the thing of like always sleeping away and the distance from like into to like into like certain strength as well as like unpredictability as well. So it's like showing the scenario that I'm going to bring out.